Hi, I'm Ali Board and I'm very proud to introduce to you my new range of watercolour paints made in conjunction with the SAA and master colourman Mark. Let's have a look at the paint making process.
Hi, I'm Mark Chapman and this is how we make watercolour. So the first part of it is sourcing the raw materials. So the first thing you source is your cordafan, which is your gum arabic, which is your adhesive, which holds your pigment to the paper. So we look for HPS selected, which is hand-picked selected cordafan. This comes from Sudan. So what we do is when we mix this with the distilled water, which we also distill on site to give us complete control over that as well, we then leave this for 2 to 3 weeks, all dependent on weather and things like that. And we then filter this through unbleached muslin bags. We used unbleached so that it doesn't interfere with any of the process. It doesn't add any extra chemicals to the watercolour. So we get a very, very pure binder by doing this. Once that's filtered through and it's all dissolved, we then take away the muslin bags and we mix in the vegetable glycerin. We add in a touch of biocide just to preserve it a little bit more. So the reason we use the cordafan is to give us complete control over the gum arabic. We started off originally looking into things like the powdered gum arabic, which when you've got a cordafan crystal, they basically, all they do with the powdered one is they grind it up just as is. So that means that all that rubbish, the stuff that's left on the floor and sticks to it, is left in the gum arabic, which gives you this kind of murky solution. Now, the full adhesive qualities are still there, but you don't get that really pure, transparent base to it, which we believe just adds that gloss and the shine and the vibrance to the pigment. And if you pick in the best pigments, you need to have the best binder. So this here is the powdered one. As you can see, you've got all that rubbish that's just sunk to the bottom because it's so dense. Even when you filter that out, which we put it through coffee filters and muslin bags, you can still see that the impurities are still suspended in the solution. So we looked into normal cordafan, which is this stuff here, which is fantastic. But then we looked into the hand-picked selector because we just wanted to produce the very best watercolour we possibly could, so we were looking at the very best of everything, which is why we ended up with the hand-picked selected. So you can see there's not a major difference, but there is a very, very slight difference, and I'm a man of details, and that's why we picked hand-picked selected. So the next part of the process is the pigment. So after you've made your binder, you need to find a pigment. So again, we looked all over the world for this pigment and we came across so many manufacturers and we gained samples from as many as we possibly could, and we settled on this one. Now this is black iron oxide, it's pigment black 11. Now when we sourced this, we tried to look at the ethics as well. So the company that we settled with for this was not just the highest quality of pigment we could get, they were also very environmentally friendly. Which was just a big seller for us because, again, when we look at the binder, we try not to use any animal products in the binder. We don't use any animal products in the binder to keep it as ethical as possible because there's just no need. So we take the pigment and the binder, we mix them together. Now this takes hours and hours and hours of formulations, but once you hit that sweet spot in the formulation, you end up with this, this is before it's been milled, so this is just wetted out. And we call it wetted out because the pigment is then basically suspended in the binder as best as it can be, ready for milling. So this is an exact triple roll mill. They're made in the US. These are, from what we can see, the best quality mills in the world. This mill has been through generations of chemists. The way the triple roll mill works is these are your cheeks. So these are your rollers, and on the front here is your knife blade. So your rollers will run at 3 different rates of speed to basically help the material run over the mill. It'll go into the first 2 rollers and it will be suspended here in a sausage kind of like motion. It's not a process of grinding, it is the process of when you split an atom, you fire the atoms at each other, and this is what this is basically doing. It is the particles colliding with each other that causes them to disperse into the gum arabic solution. Once it's dispersed properly, it will then run over to the third roller and straight onto the knife edge. It then runs straight off the knife into the bucket, and we take it to the next part. So the next part of the process is the quality control. So we've run it over the mill now. Now it's time to test if the fineness of grind is what we would like. So we use this fineness of grind gauge. It's called a Hegman gauge as well. It doesn't matter who uses it or how they use it or the amount of paint that you put on it, it will always equate to the exact same process. So what we do with this is we put a teeny blob of colour on the top there. What we have is these numbers straight down the side, which are in microns. Now there's no standard for each colour. It is just how, when you're in the formulation process, how you perceive you want the fineness of grind to be. We'd expect an iron oxide to at least sit between 10 and 5 microns. If not, then we will just keep running it over and over the mill until we get the fineness of grind that we're looking for. It's a standard that you set at the start of the formulation, and it helps keep the consistency between each batch we make. So all that you do is you put the blob of colour on there, you get this, and you just run it straight down. As you can see, about 5 and 10 is where it's splitting out, and it's really starting to show at 0, but you can see how smooth it's ran all the way down. And you can, if you want, just run it straight back over again, and you'll see it's straight to 0 basically. It's iron oxides are such a finely ground pigment anyway. They like the water, so you'd expect it to run all the way down. So the next part of the process is we test the density. So we do that by using an SG cup or a density cup. So what we do is we will put the colour into the top here. We will then close the lid. Any part that comes out of the lid, you scrape off, and then we will weigh this. You then take the total weight minus the weight of the cup, divide by 100, and that gives you a specific gravity, which we call an SG. You will then use that specific gravity to calculate how much you put into a 14mm tube. So you'll use, say, an iron oxide. This one specifically will be 1.4 on the SG. You multiply that by 14. That gives you how many grams you need to put in each tube to reach 14 mils. Because if you just put 14 grams in, which is what 14 mil of water would be, you'd be way underweight. So the next part of the process is filling the tubes. So these are 14mm aluminium tubes. They are internally lacquered, externally lacquered. You've got your membrane here and your end seal, and obviously your tube cap. So we would fill the tube using syringes and a set of scales. So we will obviously pop the paint into the syringe, fill it on top of a set of scales to the correct SG. So the fill for the black iron oxide would be 22 grams, which would equal the 14mm in the tube. So once the tube is filled, we then take the end here and we'll just push it together. We will then put it onto our custom built tube closer, and we will just crimp the end like that. So it's normally 1 fold, then 2 fold and seal. And that is how you would close the 14mm tube. So after that, we would get the label, take off the paper. This is all by eye, so this is always the seal on the front, not the back. It's just a standard we've set, and then we will put it on there, and there we go. That's a finished 14mm tube.